Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast. Today, I have a special guest, someone that I've connected through Rimini, who came on the pod before. And actually, we touched on how much of an inspiration you are to Rimini. And then I thought, well, we're doing a competitor series. And of course, we'll talk about your off season and what you committed to that. But it really intrigues me, and I'm sure it will be very valuable for the listeners about how you've committed to a 3-year off season. This is pretty rare sometimes to hear in our industry. So thank you, first of all, for coming on. It's going to be really, really cool to talk to you.
Thanks. Also, sorry to anyone about my camera. I will keep flicking it back on. I don't know why my computer does it, but yeah, thank you so much for having me on. Can't wait.
Yeah, it's I guess very in my heart as a competitor and as a coach and being part of this industry to really try and keep building the community spirit and what we can get from the sport. If we, you've got to sometimes delve into speaking to people on Instagram, meeting people at shows, expos, things like that. And I really love how we've been able to connect through Rimini. And I feel like you're similar to me. It's about empowering others and sharing your journey, of course.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like social media, it does get a lot of hate. I think there's a lot of kind of everyone loves to say about the negatives, but for me and probably for you as well, like I feel like I've met probably some of my closest friends through it. And I think like despite some of the negative parts of it, like there are definitely like good things and like inspiring people, which is nice, and just seeing people do what we do and just hopefully kind of showing them. Obviously, we've kind of done it before, so it's nice just to be able to share that.
Yeah, because of course you'll probably find it. You don't know sometimes how many people you're actually inspiring until you sort of meet them or speak to them, and they're like, "Oh wow, I've watched you on Instagram or whatever," and you're like, "Oh, I've inspired
Yeah.
someone. This is really cool."
Yeah, it is. It's crazy because I always still think of kind of just being new to this, but then I forget that I've been doing it now for like a long time. Well, still not that long compared to a lot of people, but kind of a good like 4 or 5 years. So yeah, it's nice when someone says that they kind of look up to me. It doesn't feel real, but it's nice, and like I look up to other people. So yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah, for sure. So before bodybuilding, were you into sports and things at school and stuff like that, or?
Yeah, so I've always been sporty. I've kind of just always tried any sport. Swimming was like my main thing, but yeah, I've always done sport and then found bodybuilding. So I think quite a lot of people are similar in they've done some form of sport and then landed in bodybuilding somehow. I don't think anybody kind of goes through their childhood and thinks like I want to be a bodybuilder, but it just always tends you kind of just tend to land in it somehow, don't you?
Yeah, yeah. And that would actually give me a lot of sense into how wham your back is if you've done swimming.
Yeah. To be fair, it's one of the things people are, oh, what do you do for back? And like I kind of cheated it a little bit. Like I had that from doing like years of butterfly. Like that was my stroke. So it was
Ah,
just kind of like people say it's genetics, but then I don't think it's genetic. I think it's that I literally did that for kind of 10 years, like every single day. So yeah, it kind of graced me a little bit when I chose then to go into bodybuilding. But yeah, lucky, I guess.
well, swimming as a child, I know it's a hard discipline. Like you say, doing it like pretty much every day. And I know
Yeah.
working in leisure centres and a lot of the swim squads, they're in at like 6:30 in the morning or 7 o'clock at night, and they're doing the drills and everything else. And there's so much that goes into that discipline. I've always thought, wow, especially at a young age.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I started competitive swimming when I was 11, and then by the time kind of I got more elite, it was get up at 5, swim like from 6 to 8 every morning and 4 till 6 every night. So, and then outside of those 4 hours, you'd also do kind of like your pre and post pool. So you'd do like stretching for half an hour before and after. So it was like the majority, and that was 7 days a week pretty much, like 10 sessions over the 7 days. So 3 mornings, but yeah, it was intense. I don't know how I did it, but you just do it. It's kind of like when you come out of a prep, you kind of like, how did I do that? But you
Yeah.
just when you're in it, you don't think about that. You just do it. So yeah, looking back, like I think now, how would I do that? But I guess if I needed to, I would. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it's crazy. I always talk about this on the pod. Like when I look back at when I've done a prep and I come out, when you get to that like 6 to 8 weeks post show and you start regaining health and you feel a little bit better. And I look back and I think, blimey, like there was so much that went into that. You become so structured. Everything is, for me, it gets a little bit neurotic at times
Yeah.
to try and nail everything, and everything's just tunnel vision. And then it's amazing. I always think how tunnel vision carries you through something like a prep, and then
Yeah.
like you say, when you look back and reflect, you're like, wow, how did I do that?
Yeah, it's funny actually. My coach actually said to me last week, he was like, I feel like you're just kind of in your like zone now because everything is just like it's just straightforward at the moment. Like I don't think about anything. Like I'm kind of just in autopilot, which you just get with in sport and in preps and things like that. Everything just becomes like you almost just don't think about it. Which is kind of nice when you're in it. Then when you come out of it, you're a bit like, whoa, how did that happen?
I
So
do think there's real merit in what you've just said there, actually, in regards to just doing it. I think sometimes if you think about, if you wake up in the morning and you go, oh God, I've got to do this, 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 and of course you're a vet as well, and you've got to fit everything in, it can actually
yeah.
almost set a negative tone for the day. Whereas if you can go, okay, I'm going to do all of this. This is my structure. I've prepared myself for this day. I'm going to try and enjoy it as much as I can. There's a definite difference into how much you then embrace and enjoy your prep.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like it's just kind of an insightful reminder to yourself as well that like we do it because we want to. And like anytime like I complain about, oh, I've got 2000 steps left, it's like it's because I want to do this. So it's like I can't like ask for sympathy because it's like that's what I've chosen, and making it just part of your day and part of your routine just kind of mentally then helps you think like I want to do this and like I'm gonna do this. And don't get me wrong, it gets hard sometimes, but that's why we love the sport, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. This is something that seems to come up a fair amount, particularly lately. And I always have the viewpoint of this being a choice. And I feel privileged to do this. We are able to get good food. We're okay, it gets less in prep, but we're able to have
Yeah.
access to food. We are in a position to choose to go into a deficit and diet. We've got a gym to go to. We've got changing facilities, all of the things that people
Yeah.
don't have that choice, where they don't get food. I always try and
Yeah.
think, actually, this is my choice and I'm putting myself into this. I want to challenge myself. Of course,
Yeah.
if you go into a prep or you go into this lifestyle and it's not for you, then you can just stop. I think sometimes people put pressure on themselves to continue even when they're maybe not enjoying it.
Yeah, definitely. And I do think that's it. I think it's just sometimes like even when people find like hard moments in prep, is just taking that step back and being like, actually, no, like there's so many things to be kind of grateful for, and the challenge is part of it. Like nobody goes through a prep and expects themselves not to struggle with any of it, like everyone's going to have kind of little bits where they're like, wow, like okay, this is a bit challenging, but then it wouldn't kind of be the same satisfaction at the end if it was easy, and everyone would do it if it was easy. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's kind of like my mental like what I think during prep, and I think that it's like a good thing for like first timers especially, just to take a step back and think about that. It's our choice, and even though it's going to be hard, like that's what makes it worth it almost.
Yeah, because in essence, a prep is pretty much one of the biggest challenges you can do in regards to, if you're getting, especially for your category, pretty lean. There's
Yeah.
so much that goes into that, and it can be such a cathartic challenge, like you say, when you get up on stage and if you've achieved the body composition that you want to, even stepping on stage. I don't know about you, I stand there and I think, wow, I've done that, and it all floods into my mind. Actually, maybe some of the things that I have been through to get to that point,
Yeah.
that's almost enough. And then of course your placing and what you're striving for there is like the cherry on top.
Yeah, exactly. They're kind of like I always say this, like everyone wants that, but I think the biggest part of the competing process and the part that you can control is like how you present on that day. And when you kind of stand there and know you've presented something that you've worked so hard for, then no matter what you place, which is out of your control, like you should still kind of be proud of yourself, which I think if you've done everything in the kind of the months and the off season leading up to that moment, like I think people forget that. And I think that's nice that we're talking about that today, is like is there's so much work before the prep that goes into it, and everyone thinks like I've worked so hard for 9 months to get here, and I'm just like, you've worked a lot longer than 9 months to get there.
Yeah.
Which kind of, yeah, I think a lot of people just miss the whole off season part when they say like how long they've been working for that moment. So Yeah.
and even the push up with the mind warp that you can face coming from stage lean, reversing out, going into an off
Yeah.
season, let alone for you, which we talk about going into 3 years of that.
Yeah.
It is hard when you've been stage lean before. Your version of what lean is very different to Gem Pop.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you had it, I get it, off the back of a prep when I'm in off season and I'm at that healthy spot and I'm starting to gain weight. So many people say to me, wow, you look better, so much better now.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you're not doing that thing
You
anymore.
look so healthy now. Oh, you look healthy. It's nice to see you some fat on your face. And I'm just there like, oh.
Yeah. What was your main decision, apart from the obvious of being competitive and doing a longer off season? What was your driver to go, right, I'm going to commit to a longer off season?
I think there's a few factors. For me, like I give everything to a prep, like every single thing that I have, like I will give to it. And I'm not one of these that kind of I prep but also kind of want X, Y, and Z on the side. Like when I'm in a prep, I'm in a prep. And I think for me, doing that every single year, it's like that's no life for me either. Part of it was in my 2020 prep, I pretty much gave like my whole life to it. And that was fine. Like for that moment, that's exactly what I wanted. And I got everything I wanted out of that prep. But there's no way that I could have finished that prep in October and gone back into another prep in March, April, May, even June. So I knew mentally that I wouldn't be ready to prep again the next year. I thought to myself, maybe the year after I would mentally feel like I would be ready, but I still wasn't. And kind of I was debating a 2 or 3 year off season with kind of in my head, I always knew it would be 3, but I told myself it could be 2 if I wanted it. But when I got to that second year of off season, there was a lot of things that I wanted to kind of enjoy with my life because of COVID and things. I never really had the opportunity to do trips in that first year of off season, go on holidays and things like that. So I wanted just kind of an extra year just to really just enjoy my life kind of even more kind of with like holidays and graduation and just kind of flexible eating and things before I committed to another prep. I think if I'd prepped last year, I would have found it mentally hard because there's still things that I wanted to do. Whereas now I felt like mentally ready. So there's that reason. And I think that was the driving force for me. That was kind of that if you're not mentally ready to do your prep, it's never going to be successful. But also the obvious kind of the more time you give to the off season, the more muscle you can put on. And as a natural athlete as well, kind of it takes so long to notice any change. So kind of knowing in the back of my mind that I wanted to bring back a physique where I could look and be like, wow, like I have improved, not just like squinting and thinking, oh, okay, maybe I've gained a little bit of muscle on my glutes, you know. I want my stage pictures this year to be like, okay, like she worked for that, you know. And not just for like external validation, but more so myself, like looking at them and being like, that's what I did, you know. So I think those two were the main reasons, but timing, that was kind of, yeah, that was ultimately why I chose this year.
Yeah, there's so much information there that you've just shared that will be so insightful for the listeners with off season. I personally went year on year for like 10 years and now I
Oh,
look,
wow.
yeah,
How
honestly.
did you do that?
So for me, it was like almost the opposite to you because I was in like a really unhappy place in life. So
Yeah,
every year I funneled that into bodybuilding. I found bodybuilding. I thought, oh my God, this is something I can be really good at. And
yeah.
then I competed back to back every year. And
Oh my
then
God, you're
now
crazy.
I actually had a conversation with someone the other day and he was like, you need help. And I was like,
Yeah,
what? And
yeah,
actually I found that I would find prep easier than off
yeah,
season because of what we spoke about right at the start, where you go into that tunnel vision. I
yeah,
was easily able to go, oh well, you know, I won't deal with that unhappiness in my life. I can
yeah,
be a bodybuilder. And
yeah,
it was just that neuroticism that I spoke about. It was that. And consequently, very, very hard to gain muscle, like you said, especially as females. And when I was natural, like you're not gaining much muscle.
no, you're not.
In all honesty, and it's something that's very important for, like you say, with first timers as well, things that we'll talk about throughout the pod today, for them to realize it does take so much time as a natural athlete to gain quality muscle tissue.
Yeah, I think that is the key part is even though you can kind of look like you've grown in a couple months, if it's new muscle, it's going. Like especially as like I always say, like, especially as a natural, because obviously assisted athletes have their own kind of things that is difficult, but for like the retaining muscle as a natural athlete, if that muscle is just like new tissue that you've added on in a month, your chances are you're probably going to diet it off. Whereas kind of packing on like mature tissue, it you just need time. So yeah, I do think it is a difference kind of as a natural as well, like how much you have to pay attention to your like timings of things.
Yeah, I'm sure you're aware as well with when you first do a prep, and if you were to keep going back to stage like I did, the hormonal
Yeah.
adaptations that happen off the back of a prep to then go into a recovery phase, a reverse out, and a longer off season, it lends itself to even just getting healthy again.
Yeah, exactly. Just even just like you said, like longevity of your hormonal health. That is like another thing that we need to protect, as especially as a female. As females, we have so many hormones that are kind of all over the place, even more so than kind of men. And if you imagine finishing your competition prep and giving yourself 6 months, 3 months out of that 6 months, you are just getting back to baseline, maybe if you're lucky,
Yep.
and then you've got probably 10 weeks of time to put on tissue before then you diet again, and it's fine. I definitely think that there's many athletes that do look significantly different every single year. Nick Cottrell, she's prepped 3 years in a row, like Keefe, like, and they do look better, but it's not something that you can do forever. So like maybe like a few seasons and you can look better, but it will, I do think, like probably take its toll
Yeah.
eventually.
Yeah, and like you say, the mental readiness, I don't
Yeah.
now I'm in a happier position, and I've got a really good lifestyle, everything's facilitated to be a good bodybuilder as such. It's
Mm-hmm.
like I wouldn't be ready to go into a prep again this year, having prepped last year. It's
Yeah.
like, I just think very much what you described. I think I wouldn't want to right now because I'm actually enjoying life, and like you say, a bit of flexible eating and also repairing relationship with food off the back of a prep.
Yeah, definitely. Because like you said, like whether you're on a meal plan or macros, like it is just like it is a long period of kind of just one way, and just kind of making sure that we do have the time away from that. It is really important. Again, just a longevity perspective, I think, and like a mental health kind of perspective, especially if you've struggled previously with food. I think it's very easy to kind of hide that with a prep, and off season is where you really kind of learn if your relationship with food is good or not, because I struggled with eating when I was younger, and when I was on prep I thought, oh yeah, like all of these problems have gone away, but there's little habits that will creep back in once you finished your prep, and I think you can't kind of mask eating disorders with a prep, just because it's controlled. It's still controlled, do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I think the off season is where I've really learned about my relationship with food, definitely, and I've seen that like significantly transform. But in a prep, like you're masking kind of stuff, aren't you?
Yeah, it's either it can lead to food disorders, and that's definitely, for sure. I know a lot of people that have gone down that route, whether that's restriction or whether that's binge type behavior going into
Yeah.
restriction, this sort of cycle. And also, if like you touched on there for yourself, having food pathologies as a child or a teenager or even young adult, you then
Hmm.
go into the sport of bodybuilding. And I know people that then go, well, it's a sport. I'm in a deficit for a sport, but actually they're still just, it's very much exhibiting a food disorder.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that's definitely something that like might like mentally you need to like take control of, rather than just kind of like thinking it will get better, because without like action it doesn't, and like you wouldn't want to be doing a sport that's ruining every other part of your life. So yeah, that's another reason why I think like off seasons regularly are definitely a good thing.
Yeah, I had China Green on the pod. It was awesome to have her on because she touched on similar things that we're talking about now. And with food, she actually got a new other half. And when she went into her off season, which was a longer period like yourself, he had to take her to a restaurant and go order a meal and eat the
Mhm.
food. And she was like, oh, in this social scenario,
Yeah.
because you're not in that in a prep. And I don't know if you've had experience with it, but I think I probably put it on myself personally that I was like, I'm not a proper bodybuilder if I go and eat a meal out.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to think like that. I did kind of used to think, oh, like I shouldn't, or I should eat kind of the best thing on the menu and things like that. But I think my partner actually, he's very much like when he goes out, he gets what he wants. And I definitely think kind of being with him for the last 3 years of my off season as like I said, transform my relationship with food, because now I'll go and look at the menu and be like, oh, like what looks the best, not what looks the healthiest. And I definitely had a period of I'd go to a restaurant and order kind of like a bunless chicken burger grilled with, swap your fries for salad.
Yeah.
And I only think like the last few months, especially, like I would be going for the fully loaded burger because that's what I actually wanted, it wasn't. And at the end of the day, I think kind of like as long as you're not then going home and then eating everything in the cupboard and carrying on that food kind of for a few days, like, and you're genuinely just going and enjoying that meal, like it's fine. Like you're not going to kind of gain like X amount of fat just because you went and you chose the nice thing on the menu, not the healthiest thing. So yeah, that's another kind of like hidden restriction that I think a lot of bodybuilders will put on themselves, where subconscious, like you don't think about it and you don't think that you're kind of making these decisions, and you put it down to, oh, I'm doing it because I do this sport, but in reality it's probably just masking something deep down. So yeah, I think a lot of us probably do that.
It's so easy. I would always, previously obsess over menus. I'd even before I don't know if I've spoken about this on the pod, but I phoned a restaurant literally 10 minutes before, like I snuck off from my family and friends, phoned them and have you got chicken breasts?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah. And then I'd go in, and it even got to the point where I'd visualize the meal the night before, what it was going to be, what it would look like.
Mm.
I'd, go recite in my head how I would order it. Okay, so I want a chicken breast, broccoli on the side, no sauces, no butter. Da, da, da,
Yeah.
da. And like, it's crazy when I think back because it was so isolating for myself because this was all internal. I never spoke to anyone about it.
Yeah, exactly. And then deep down, like you'd probably look at like other people's food and be like, wow, that looks really nice,
Yeah.
but I can't have that. But then why can't we have that? Like we can, And I think it is just breaking down that barrier. And then like you kind of the first time you order something you actually want, you're like, wow, like this is actually nice.
Yeah.
Like who knew? Who knew all of this seasoning was actually amazing?
Yeah.
So yeah, and it's something that takes time. Like it's definitely taken me like a few years from when I was kind of disordered eating to like now just having what I want. But happily, like I'll go for a meal, and sometimes I do still want chicken breast and
Yeah.
rice. Sometimes I do, because I do genuinely love that. But
Yeah.
sometimes I go and I'm like, no, I want like a loaded burger. Like I love, like I love burgers.
I
So
love burgers. That's my post-show meal.
yeah, like just like a fried chicken burger, like give it to me. So
Yeah,
now, like if I go somewhere that has that, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have that, and not even think about it, which is something that I've wanted forever. So yeah, that's a nice feeling, and I think that also shows that I was starting prep in a good place this year because I was kind of just very chilled with everything, which is nice.
for sure. I think first point of call is actually recognizing that maybe you do have some undercurrent of food pathologies and what that, sometimes I think voicing it to your support network. Of
Yeah,
course, if you've got a coach, ideally you're going to have a coach that you trust and inspires you, and you can have that open conversation. But it's taking ownership ourselves to go, actually, I don't think this is maybe normal behavior, and I,
yeah,
I maybe do need a bit of help. But that in itself is quite hard because you touched on it there. I would always mask it as I would do these certain food behaviors, but I'd go, well, you guys know because I'm a bodybuilder, so I can't have that.
yeah. When you can.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it is very, very isolating. And I know there will be people listening that go, okay, maybe that's similar to my thought processes. And what you've touched on already is so, so insightful into how you can actually start to gravitate away from that and realize that, food is there to be enjoyed. And as bodybuilders, we know generally how to work around it. There's certain things you can do to facilitate a meal out, of course.
yeah, exactly. And I think that is so key. It's like if I know that I'm going out kind of it could even I could build up to it, and I think mentally some people might reduce their calories like each day in the week and things like that. But for me, like everything stays normal, but the day of, what I'll do is just have like protein meals, literally just like protein and veg normally. So like my first few meals will be like maybe just like chicken and veg, and then, you know, just like low calorie meals, but just keeping my protein intake high throughout the day. So I know like I'm going out to that meal and my macros will sit around like 100 protein, like, and then I keep my carbs and fats as low as I can. And then I know in that meal, all I need is kind of a protein, and then I've got enough calories, fats, and carbs to kind of make up. And it's never going to be exact, but it's just kind of accommodating that meal a little bit. I know kind of some people will like, if they are on a meal plan, they'll replace their last 2 or 3 meals with that meal out. Kind of depends what phase you're in, doesn't it? But yeah, kind of there's things you can do to make that damage less. And like we said earlier, like then not going home and thinking, oh, I've had a meal off, now I can eat the rest of the cupboard, because you don't need that. Like you've gone, you've enjoyed your meal, go home, go to bed, and start your day tomorrow, you know?
Yeah, and I've done things like that when it's like off plan. What I'd do is all week I'd almost restrict, and then when it's off plan, I'm so fucking hungry that
Yeah.
it goes through the roof, and then I feel like I didn't really go into like binge type behavior, but I have quite a good capacity for food. Like genuinely, I can eat quite a lot. So
Yeah.
I would then, exercise that, and I wouldn't feel like I was necessarily overly full, but I didn't need to. I think that's sort of the message there. You don't need to then eat all evening, all high
Yeah.
calorie foods. And what I found is when I started to realize that I was exhibiting these behaviors, I would do what you do. So exactly the same. I have protein and like minimal carbs throughout the day.
Yeah.
Then I'd have the meal, and then I'd sometimes, depending on what the time is, still put aside like a protein yogurt or something before
Yeah.
bed. So I'm
Yeah.
not like, oh, I eat at 5 o'clock and then I'm not
No.
eating again the next day till 8 o'clock, and then facilitating these types of behaviors. But recognition of what I was doing was definitely my, I guess, like massive change in mindset, because I had to realize for myself this isn't the right way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. And I have seen on like social media people being like, oh, it's my like cheat day, or it's my day off plan, and they'll start their day with like a Mackey's breakfast, then they'll go out for lunch, then they'll go and get like a Domino's with cookies, and then they'll go to like Casper's and get a dessert. And it's like that is just, it's so bad, because it's kind of like you're almost living for that day, where then you think like calories don't count today because it's my day off plan, but like it's just creating such like a negative kind of thing with food, and you almost feel like in that 24 hours like you can get in as much food as you want. And I'm glad I've never kind of done that, because it's like that is kind of something I see a lot on social media, and it's like those calories still count, but it's just you're just being like silly about it. And I think that is also another negative kind of behavior with food. Whereas if like you and me, like you can get to the point where you're like, I'm gonna go and enjoy this meal later, and then kind of be happy with it and enjoy kind of the company and enjoy like the nice food, and then just go back to my normal meal when I get home, and a normal day the next day. That's when you can, I think, say that you're just in a good place, you know?
Yeah, and I definitely found those like light bulb moments, like we say, ordering off a menu what you want and this type of thing. The first time I was
Yeah.
able to go, okay, so I'm gonna go and have a meal, and I had like a thin based pizza with loads of like triple chicken and double mushrooms, and then
Yeah.
I ate that nice and slowly. Again, something that we need to probably practice a little bit, not just going, oh my God, I want all this food, and trying to enjoy a palate experience, enjoy a nice meal. It wasn't, overly fatty or anything. It was enjoyable. And
Yeah.
then just went for a walk and then carried on with my day, rather than,
Yeah.
before I'd be like, right, okay, so now I need,
Fasting.
yeah,
And
baked goods and some ice cream. And then of course, the next day, you feel like shit when you've done this, even if
yeah.
it's not a complete binge. You
Yeah.
still feel like, oh, did I need to do that? And probably the answer is you didn't need to do that, because actually when you flexible diet as well, which is what I realized, that you can include things most days, especially in off season when your
Yeah.
calories get high.
Yeah, I still now like I like on my in my low days, like I don't really have anything, because I don't really have enough calories for it. But I
Yeah,
get a high day once a week at the moment, and I always include something I like, whether it's like a little chocolate bar or like a ice cream, whatever, because like you can still do that. And I think I've always macro tracked, so I've never ever had a meal plan. In my last prep, I'd have at least something that I liked every day because I could,
yeah,
and until like I get to the point where like I'm hungry and I need to like make better choices with those macros, I'll always have like a little thing that I like, because you can. And I think that is like maturity in the sport. It's knowing that like you can have these things and make them like part of your lifestyle without it kind of having negative impacts. Obviously you can't use all your macros for like chocolate ice cream, but you know, like having like something nice, and it not being kind of so strict, I think is nice as well.
Yeah, there's definitely points in prep, especially sort of the tail end or as you get close
Yeah.
to the show, where you almost reside yourself to the fact. And again, this is sort of maturity in the sport where you go, actually, I'm probably going to need to eat similar foods every day. I
Yeah.
need to make it as non-fuss as possible. You know, there's going to be certain food sources that are going to be better for your digestion and this type of
Hmm.
thing. That sort of thing comes into play. But I've spoken
Yeah.
about this before, you know, at the start of a prep, if you've been quite a good off season, your calories are quite high. It doesn't
Yeah.
need to be straight away like, oh, I need to restrict everything.
Yeah, no, exactly. And like even in off season as well, like I macro tracked through my whole off season, and just having like something that I wanted most days, like, and I was fine with that. And even like I would have some idea, I'd keep my meals the same, but know that I'd have kind of an extra few hundred calories spare. Where like if I was out with my friends and like they were getting like coffee, I could get like a nice coffee, like a mocha, or like I love a mocha, and I would get one, and I would like put it into my macros roughly. And like some people are like, well, you don't need to do that, and you can kind of save those calories knowing that you've had something extra. But I like to just like put things in just so I'm more aware of where I am, or like having something kind of in the evening and things like that. So yeah, I think you can definitely do that in like an off season. And it just helps you, again, longevity. I know I keep saying it, but that is like, if you are genuine in the sport for the right reasons, like you do need to do these things for kind of promoting like positivity and stuff like that.
Yeah, also mental health, which is
Exactly, yeah.
it is massive. It's when you're in a prep, what goes into that, especially you could be doing back-to-back shows, depending on where you start and if you qualify
Yeah.
for certain shows and things like this. It's a long time to say no for.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
it really is.
and to gain that back and be okay with going, I can actually go for a coffee, like you say.
Yeah.
You know, for most people in the whole world, a mocha would be very normal.
Yeah, I know. It's
Whereas
mad.
for us, like we really, what I do find that through bodybuilding and being able to prep and do the diets, my appreciation for food is very different to what it was before.
Yeah.
Something like if I was going to have a latte, I'd actually really savor that in a positive way. I'd think this is really nice to have this
Yeah.
today as part of my, you know, day and whatever, and it's away from the norm. Whereas in prep, I was on black coffee only, and it's like,
Decaf.
yeah, and it's amazing, isn't it? As well, I
Yeah.
always reflect on prep, similar to what we said at the start. I reflect and I think I actually found rice cakes with a bit of jam very
Best.
enjoyable.
Yeah, the best things in the world. Like it's crazy. I haven't got any weird foods in at the moment, but I remember in my last prep, like I'd end up making something, and to any normal person, it'd be like, what is that?
Yeah.
And you're just like, this is amazing. Like this is the best thing ever. I know, I don't know if you do Georgie Cooper, but I always remember her putting her like spinach and egg like pancakes in the pan for her prep, and she'd be like, this is amazing. I don't know what I was thinking. And then she tried them in off season, and it's like, oh God, what are you doing? But yeah, you just have appreciation for anything, don't you?
Yeah. You spoke earlier about prepping and actually when you get deeper into the deficit, making use of foods more, which I think is a very good point. It's again back to that acceptance of I'm in a prep and what needs to happen is I need to try and keep my micronutrients up. I need to,
Yeah,
you know, facilitate volume if you can, so that
yeah,
because as well, you get to a point in prep where it's like, I'm not going to be fully satiated for quite some time now.
yeah, exactly. Like, and it's making those changes to fulls, that the different foods that can like keep you as full as long as you possibly can, and like kind of not having like it swapping like bagels to potatoes or oats and things like that. And they're just things like they you just do because, you know, at the end of the day, like you've got to do whatever you can to, like you said, get in what you need, but also try and feel as good as you can whilst doing it. And you can't be wasting those macros on like dense foods, because you know, you'll be starving and you're making life harder for yourself.
Mm.
Like I like to choose foods that I do enjoy, but also kind of they are like tactically placed where they are so that I can kind of get from meal to meal without kind of feeling like I'm gonna die, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's training as well, and this is what I love about
Yeah.
off season. You probably found it, you get to a certain point in off season where you've gone through that health recovery phase, you
Hmm.
start to get back on track, hormones start to repair, and then you get to a point where you're like, oh my god, I can train again.
Yeah, and you like feel like you like actually feel good. And it's actually kind of crazy because you do have that, but then you also go off the scale the other end where like my training then got worse because I was like eating loads and I'd kind of have the negative effects of that. So you have that sweet spot in the middle where you're like everything is great. Like I
Yeah,
feel full, I have enough food. I don't like go through my session towards the end and start flagging because I have energy and like everything is progressing and it's great. And that is like the happy little place of off season. But yeah, it definitely comes with kind of its own struggles, doesn't it?
yeah, it's actually something that Rimini touched on the pod. She said about it's quite hard when you get to certain stages in off season
Yeah.
to eat all the food. And in a prep, first timers listening that maybe have never done an off season, in a prep, you can, especially the first time, be really sort of obsessive into what you're going to get after the show. So
Yeah.
hungry and hungry. I just want to eat food. But I always say to people, food is not going to go anywhere. And
No.
it's quite quick actually that you get to a point once you've gone through that first initial stage after a show where you're like, ah, I'm eating quite a lot now.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that is another thing also that I think will be useful for people is just don't get into that kind of mindset of I
Mm.
can't wait to finish so I can have this because like prep isn't something that you want to wish away. I think like you need to just kind of embrace what you're doing for what it is. And like I know like some people will kind of stock up their food cupboard for when they're finished and like I wouldn't recommend doing that. Like I didn't do it because I knew I prepared myself even before my prep for what my post show would be like and everything changes once you finish prep anyway. Like you kind of you don't want what you think you want and
Yeah,
like I remember when I finished my prep, like I never really thought about it, but then the next morning, all I wanted was a bacon sandwich, like just random things. And
yeah,
even like little things, like all you want is milk in your coffee, or all you want is just kind of like a certain sweet after this, but like it's not what you think it's going to be. So like as a first timer, like planning your post show, I almost think puts pressure on it that doesn't need to be there. And it's like when I finished my last show, I didn't have any plans, and it's like I'm finished. What do I want? And like all I wanted was an Oreo milkshake. That's all I wanted. Like it was weird, you know? It's not like whereas I could have planned in my head like, oh, I know I'm gonna want to go for like this and that and then I would have gone for that, but that's not, you know. So yeah, I think just kind of not thinking about it is definitely like a healthy thing to do, especially if you're a first timer.
yeah. That's so useful that you've said that. I definitely wish I'd heard that more when I
Yeah.
started competing because I would be so obsessive about it. And it wasn't until after shows that I'd go to a restaurant and just be like, oh, I want to have this. And then that was the
Yeah.
most enjoyable. It was so nice to take that edge off rather than think I've got to eat all of this shit.
Yeah, or people make a list as well. Like I like, and don't get me wrong, like I think I probably had a list in my notes of like little things that I thought of that like, oh, I want to go for like Five Guys or whatever. And I did have like a little mental note, but it was never like pressure. It was more like these are things that I'm thinking of that like so I wrote them down and it was like, oh, like at some point in my off season, like I just want to make sure that I have that. So yeah, that could be a way around it as well for some people, just kind of making a note of like what you think you may want and then seeing how you go. But yeah, definitely not stockpiling food because
Yeah, only gonna. I even have this with lifestyle clients that are doing a diet, and that's nowhere near as extreme as a prep, as
yeah,
you know, and trying to actually own it and go, I'm not gonna have these foods in the house because this could be a trigger food. There will be a time where I can have these foods, but right now I'm gonna have X, Y, and Z in my diet, and however you work around that with clients and people I speak to about being smart. If you've got shit in the house, then you're going to want to eat
you're
it.
gonna want it. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, definitely to be like mindful, I think is a useful thing.
Yeah, I definitely found as well with when I compete and being backstage and things, different at different federations and different shows, of course, but there is behaviors backstage as well that I always try and speak about on the pod, with people staying in their own lane and maybe not being enticed into eating certain things on show day. That actually, my best example is, I remember I was backstage and there was some first timers and they had like big things like a cinema of filled with
Bigger
sweets.
mix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They had like Reese's, Oreos, things like this, and it was all things that actually in an off season you could track. So like you spoke about having
Yeah.
sort of something in your day where you enjoy it, whereas like you gave that example of an Oreo milkshake, you ordinarily wouldn't make that at home. So
Yeah.
actually it's like, oh, I'm gonna have something that I actually haven't had access to that I will really, really enjoy, and you're responding to what you're actually wanting to have. And I always try
Yeah.
and say this, just because everyone else is doing it at a show right after you get off stage doesn't mean that you have
Yeah.
to take part. Stay focused on what you've started to plan in your head. Like you said, you think about post show before you go into prep, ideally.
Yeah, exactly. And just like planning like your reverse diet with your coach and things like that, and being aware of kind of like when you finish competing, like your hormones are gonna be completely out of whack, and being
Yeah.
mindful. Like I remember one of the first meals I had post show was a Turkish, because like I love Turkish food, it's my favorite. And like I just didn't feel full. Like I kept eating and I was like, this in my head I was like, I know that like this portion should now make me full, but those hormones, they don't signal. Like your leptin and ghrelin, like they are not going to tell you you're full. So another thing kind of is being like mindful of how much you know that you can eat on a normal kind of situation, and then kind of maybe even reducing that by like 20%, because you're a lot leaner than when you last had a meal. But yeah, kind of you need to know that kind of for a few months your hormones are going to not be there, so there's nothing to tell you to stop eating. You just need to not be a pig, and that's another thing I think where people kind of find like a bit hard is they eat until they're full but not realize that they're never going to be full, and then they feel sick an hour later because their hormones may have tried to tell them that stop.
Yeah. And then there is that risk of, like we touched on earlier, of whether you go into binge episodes, into purging, all of the
Yeah.
things. It's very easy to find yourself in that spot, and it's very, very lonely, very scary when you don't really know what to do when you have eaten potentially too much, because you don't get that sort of dump, I always call it, where you're like, shit, I've eaten too much. It's
Yeah.
not for a while, and then you
Yeah.
don't feel good. And I speak from experience and working
Yeah.
with clients. It's difficult then to not want to maybe go into a restriction, and then that cycle continues.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
Yeah, so just kind of preparing a plan with your coach before you get there is, and not just winging it, is definitely something that I would recommend. And yeah, and also just like we said similar earlier, if you have back-to-back shows, like you need to be prepared also not to have anything. Like after my first show, my PCA show, so I came off stage when everyone was stuffing their faces with cookies, and I literally had my bowl of oats and a Diet Coke, and I
Yes,
went
I
to
love
bed because
that.
yeah, because I messaged my coach after the show and I was like, it's peak week again tomorrow, because I had back-to-back peak weeks, and I was like, she was like, have something if you want, and I was like, no, like I don't need it. I need to like not put myself behind, and if you kind of, if I went out for a meal that night, like that's 2-3 extra thousand calories that I'd probably have to shift.
Yeah.
So I literally came off stage, I didn't have anything, I watched people stuff their faces, I had a bowl of oats, had a Diet Coke, went to bed, and then carried on my diet the next day, because at the end of the day, like the job wasn't done. And I think people are so eager to get off stage to stuff their face. But like if your job isn't finished yet, like you need to kind of mentally be prepared, like you said, not to compare yourself to what other people are doing, because you can't be getting off stage and stuff in your face if you've got another peak week. Like it's just there's no need for it. And again, it comes back to like your reasons for competing, I think. And if you truly want to do well the next week and your coach says like ideally we don't have anything, then being prepared to wait. So yeah, I think that's another thing that I think people kind of think like, oh, then my coach is being so hard on me, but everything has a reason, and there's a reason why it kind of you can't just go and eat everything.
Yeah, that's so, so true. It's what I actually experienced in my last prep. My coach said exactly the same to me. He said, if you want to go for a meal, something like a Turkish, because
Yeah,
as we know, I'm sure you know as well, you can go for like the chicken
chicken,
slash
rice.
pig, yeah, and then you can
Yeah,
go for like salad, and even if you had a little portion of rice or something like this. And
Yeah.
2 reasons I said to him, I don't want to do that. One was that even having something like a bowl of oats would be enough for me.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's all you want. And for me, like peak week, it was the hardest week of my prep because I couldn't have my Diet Coke, couldn't have my sweeteners. And when I got on stage, I was like, can someone just get me a Pepsi Max? Like that is that is all I want. Like I don't care about food. I just want a Pepsi Max. I went to the shop and I got my little Pepsi Max. I was like, hey, I'm happy again. And like, yeah, that is, I think when you get off stage, like you're thirsty, like you just want a drink. And that's another thing actually. If it is like your last show and you get the go ahead to kind of go and like, have a food or whatever, down a liter of water first because you're going to be so dehydrated and that kind of contributes to you feeling rubbish the next day. So yeah,
Mm.
thought I'd get that in as well is just have a drink first.
Yeah, I do find as well the other reason why I didn't want to do that is because when you do then go for a meal out, it can do one of two things. You can either be a bit disappointed sometimes, and
Yeah.
for me, the undercurrent was like you said, I've got another show in, I think it was like 3 weeks later, and I thought, why do I want to fuck around if I've got another show? The job
Yeah.
isn't done.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
it's
Yeah.
and like you said, it's doing this sport for the right reasons, finding your why and digging down on that. I think sometimes bodybuilding, because it is very accessible now, it's so cool on social media. Like everyone's like, oh, I'm gonna compete. And it's like, what are you actually doing it for? And sometimes when you ask people why are you
Yeah.
doing this, they're like, I don't know. Well, I thought I'd challenge myself. And it's like a
Yeah.
bodybuilding prep is beyond a challenge.
Yeah, it's a challenge that you can get, satisfaction in other ways. Like if your why isn't the right why, then the sport is just it's a recipe for disaster. Like it's not a healthy sport. I wouldn't recommend the sport to people.
Yeah.
And whenever people ask me like why I do it, and it's like it's just something inside like I can't explain, but like there is reasons and it's not something where you just want to like because people look at your photos and they're like, wow, like I want to do that. And I just say, no, like, no, you really don't. It's not like, it's not glamorous. Like, yeah, okay, I might look pretty in a bikini with my hair up and my makeup done, but God, like, how long has it taken that for me to get there? And I tell people, like, you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Like you just need to kind of, yeah, kind of remind yourself why and really look at it if you're doing it for the right reasons, definitely.
And if you do it, very similar to what we've spoken about, you've got to be prepared to go. I'm going to commit to this prep. And I personally see it as I'm going to do what it takes. There's never been anything that's deviated me away from what I need to do in a prep to complete that. And
Yeah.
I've had people, family members die and things, and that's not, a sob story or anything, but actually it even sort of it was cathartic and made me more motivated to go, I'm going to complete this prep now.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like things like that really do, they definitely test you.
They
And
do.
mine's kind of like not as extreme, but my one of my second peak weeks, I had some illness, I don't know what it was, but I literally couldn't get out of bed to do my check-in photos or anything like that. And that whole week was like the biggest struggle ever. And the night before the show, I literally was laying in the bed, like I actually can't like get out of bed. And I still got up and did it because we're stubborn and that's kind of why
Yeah.
we do the sport, but it's kind of almost like you set yourself this goal and you would do anything to get there, like and then kind of you crash a bit afterwards. But yeah, if your why isn't strong enough, like those moments that you get tested, you'll never ever get through them. You'll just crumble. So
Mm,
yeah, I think when you face something which isn't part of the plan,
yeah.
that's when you know whether you're in it for the right reasons or not.
Yeah, can relate to being really, really ill before
Yeah.
2019 when I did the finals with UK UP. I think I had food poisoning or something. I was literally
Really,
thinking, I feel like I'm gonna die.
like,
And you just pull yourself together, don't you? It's mental.
yeah. And like, I was even on stage, like, so lightheaded, and I was like, I don't know how I'm still standing, but I'm here.
Yeah.
And like no one would know because I didn't tell anyone apart from my partner, and like my stage photos look great and I look glamorous, but God, I felt awful. Like it was kind of like, wow, like I genuinely don't know how I did that. And you look back and you're like, how, like what, like we were saying earlier, like you look back at it and you're like, what the hell, like how
What is wrong with me?
yeah, how did I get through that? But then it kind of like that's what makes you a good athlete,
Yeah.
um, which is kind of a bit crazy, but
It is, but it is a sport of, I guess I would oversight it in my own mind that actually there's a lot of people that say they're going to prep and they don't like finish the prep, they drop out
yeah,
at whatever point. And actually it does breed a certain personality and a certain type of person to even complete one prep, let alone potentially multiple ones.
multiple, and let alone 10 back to back.
Oh, no, I've definitely got a screw loose. It's
Yeah,
amazing the tunnel vision, like we've spoken about, what that brings, and when you're doing it. So you actually said earlier about when you go back on stage, you want to go, okay, I've done my job. That definitely for me was, or it still is, something that I want to always see what I can do with my physique.
yeah, exactly.
It's very cool for me. Like I
Yeah,
don't think there's really many things in life where you can go, I'm gonna explore different things to see what the effect is when I do go back to stage, or whether that's when you're in an off season, whether that's going to drive you to push up further. And it is hard when you go into an off season to have markers per se.
yeah,
Is it quality
definitely.
muscle tissue? The accumulation of course you do gain body fat as well as muscle. That's just how it is. It is hard, isn't it? And I'm sure you've had
Yeah.
mind warps through that time to go, you know I need to be able to see this objectively. Of course that's where a coach comes in, but it's like,
Mhm.
am I going in the right direction? Is there muscle there as well as the fat gain?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I didn't have a coach for my off season, so it was almost as well like that made it more challenging in terms of like questioning whether or not I was making progress. And the way I kind of looked at it was like if every single day like my logbook is progressing, I'm eating kind of in a surplus. I didn't overanalyze my physique for quite a lot of my off season just because I was nailing the things that I knew I needed to do to grow. Comparing photos in an off season is so difficult. You'll know yourself, like even if you're the exact same body weight as you were at kind of this time 2 years ago, like looking at your photos and being able to really know what the difference is, it is hard. And I think it's not until you then re-diet that you know that kind of like, oh, okay, like I do look better. And I went through parts of my off season where I would put photos next to like 4 years ago, and I was like, I can't see the difference, like, and part of it is me because I never think that I've made any progress. But
Yeah.
sometimes you look at a photo in a specific lighting and angle and you're like, well, I look worse now.
Yep.
It's not until you diet where you're like, oh, okay, like I actually do look different. And for me, my start of prep photos, putting those two next to each other, like 3 years apart, was my like, okay, like I still have to convince myself they look different because I look at them and I'm like, oh yeah, but I'm posing better, but like I've had people tell me like, no, like stop being stupid, like you do look different. And I think until I like get on stage and compare like my stage photos, like I'll never actually believe it. But just still like trusting that what you're doing is progressing. And I see people kind of go through off season and they don't kind of put in the work and they expect to look different, and you're not going to. And I think like there's things you can track, and that's like your logbook and your progress. And even some people choose not to logbook in off season, but they know that they're lifting more than they ever have done. And if you're doing things that you've never done before and you're lifting things that you've never been able to lift before, and you're eating foods and you're not being silly, and you're hitting like your sleep, like you are going to grow. And I think that's kind of like an important thing as well, is like looking at other markers rather than just photos when you're at that like level of body fat.
Yeah, and also like we spoke about a lot today, repairing your relationship with how you see yourself. Something I've definitely struggled with myself is my own body image in off season. And because I then lean on, well, I'm going back into a prep in not so long, it's like, oh,
Mhm.
well, okay, so I can push up for a short period of time, that's cool. And then I'll be back in the diet. Whereas for yourself, it's really inspirational for me. And I know so many people that will be inspired to actually go, do you know what? Mentally, I need a longer off season.
Yeah.
I also need to repair health markers. I need to, you know, even facilitate the better training. All of these things that come from off season, we often forget about when we've been lean before and you just want to be there again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like everyone loves being lean. Like it is,
Cool.
it comes with, yeah, like it comes with its own perks. Like now, like I'm seeing lines on my body that I haven't seen since 2020, and then it's like, wow, okay, that's pretty cool. And
Yeah.
like I do, like I feel like everyone says this, but you are more productive in prep because you have set things that you need to do, and you just go into like autopilot and do them, and it's great. But then kind of also like falling in love with the off season of progressing your gym movement, which is ultimately why you should be doing this in the first place. And if you're not enjoying your training and you're not enjoying the lifts and you're not enjoying things like that, then like it's a sport for you. Like you can't just enjoy the being lean part because you're not going to progress. So falling in love with kind of that side of it, and falling in love with seeing your body get stronger and seeing your period come back and things like that, like they are so important. And kind of people that are going back into preps without even regaining their cycle, like you need to kind of question whether that is a good thing or not, because yeah, like I said, as a female especially, like that it's really important.
And being a natural athlete, so
Yeah.
important, that message. I actually, this will probably blow your mind. I didn't have a period for 6 years.
Wow.
um, and
Crazy.
again, another thing, I look back and I think, fucking hell, that's not good, you know?
No, exactly. And I think like as a female, and as natural or assisted, like
Yeah,
getting your period back is the one thing that I think like you really need to do. Like mine came back 3 weeks post show because I pushed my food. Well, I had a coach for 2 months post show because I knew that I needed that.
yeah,
Um, and we pushed food straight back up. Everything kind of, my body just kind of felt happy. I've never had bloods done, which is something that I maybe could have done, but I just haven't. But like everything went back to normal quite quickly, and my hunger hormones did return within like a month or so, where I would then start to like feel full and things like that. So for me that was my health markers getting back. But
yeah.
I know some girls that take 6, 8, 12 months to get their period back in an off season, which like you got to think what's happening on the inside, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And organ health as well. There's lots of things
Yeah.
that, happened to me from doing this for so long.
Yeah.
And another reason why I'm like, I don't need to go back to stage this year. And actually,
Yeah.
I think similar to you, being able to have a longer off season, then go, actually, I'm ready to bring it, you know?
Yeah, and I do think you just get like a different type of fire when you've waited for so long. Like it's like you said, like it's been 3 years for me. So like my like desire to do this is so strong that I know that whatever kind of happens this prep, like I will get to the end. It's not a negotiable thing. Um, whereas I think like if I'd gone straight back into a prep after my last one, I do think I would have struggled. And even just like little indicators, like I tried a mini cut about 6 months the end of my prep and my body didn't respond. And I think kind of being able to get body fat off when your body is in that position is so much harder, and you're making that prep so much harder for yourself.
Yeah,
Whereas like where I'm sitting now, I'm about kind of I don't even know how long I've been on prep for, but my body is responding so well because it was happy, if that makes sense. Like
yeah.
every time we drop food, like my body drops weight. And when I tried to mini cut too soon, I could slash my food, and my body was like, no.
No thanks.
Yeah, it was like,
I remember
wow, we're
this.
not doing this again. It was just like, don't even try me. So I was like, all right, okay.
Do you have a new coach now compared to when you first prepped?
Yeah, so the coach I had in my first prep, she doesn't do bodybuilding coaching anymore. So I joined 3DMJ coaching in summer last year because I knew that I was gonna kind of, my partner's an online coach, but he kind of took me through my off season, like we did it together. But I always knew that I wouldn't have him for prep just because I didn't want to bring my relationship into my bodybuilding prep. It's not something that I would want. So
Yeah.
yeah, joined 3DMJ in summer last year, and they've been amazing. Like I literally, we get along, me and Brian, so well. And I couldn't imagine a better person to take me through this prep. And why I really like them as a coaching team is they're very pro-life, which is pretty much all we spoke about today in the podcast, is like keeping your life and everything alongside your prep. And they're so on that. Like I'm going on holiday during this prep, and I'm carrying on with like macros and everything. I've booked an apartment, but like he's so willing for me to do that because he knows
Yeah.
it means a lot, and they're very kind of like pro longevity, but also just kind of pro keeping your life as normal as you can for as long as you can, which I respect so much for me as a person, me as an athlete, because for me that is what makes me enjoy this, is being able to do my normal things. Like I don't want to shut myself away for 9 months of the year just to kind of get on stage. I want to still meet my friends, still kind of, obviously the food side of things, that is what I have to control. And
Yeah.
that's, I'm okay with that, but like still being able to do things is important to me. So yeah, so it's going well so far, and like it took a long time to decide who I would want to take me through the prep, but
Yeah.
knowing that their kind of morals fit with mine is why I kind of made that decision.
And how long
Yeah.
is your prep this time?
It's a very long prep, so it'll be kind of from start to finish, probably closing on 40 weeks. At least we haven't confirmed exact shows yet, but it will probably be at least 25 to the first show
Yeah.
from when I started, which I'm fine with. Like it's kind of, it allows time for diet breaks. It allows, I get a weekly refeed just to kind of replenish like glycogen and feel like a little bit better. So it's a different approach, but bit longer, but also kind of it's more like a slower rate of loss, which I'm happy with. So
Yeah, I think it's so important as well to lay heavy on allowing more time rather than less.
yeah, definitely, because you don't want to be rushing. And for me, like cardio is the one part of bodybuilding where I don't enjoy it. I
Yeah.
like I can't lie and say I love getting on the bike, and some people do, and I don't know if they're genuine or not, you know, because
Yeah.
I don't know how somebody can actually enjoy the Stairmaster. Like people say, like, "Oh, I love this. This is so good," but I do kind of question. I'm like, "Are you sure?"
My
Because
other half will like you immediately.
I can like honestly say like I hate that. Like I that is the one part where if I didn't have to do it, like fine. And at the moment, we've gone kind of like, I think we're 5 weeks in prep and we haven't touched a bit of cardio, and my weight is coming down and everything is great. And we're just using food and steps to get that weight off. And for me, that's perfect. Whereas I know some girls have started prep the last week or two and they're already on like 5 times 30 minutes cardio. And
Yeah.
for me, that I couldn't get through a prep doing that.
Yeah.
I can't remember who, but I was having a chat to someone in the change rooms actually at the gym, and I said like, if my coach started my prep and I was on 6 times 30 minutes, like there's no way I would get to the end of that prep.
Yeah.
And like if I did get to the end of that prep, I would not enjoy it. Whereas now, like I have no cardio, and I know that there's going to come a time where I will have to have it in, and that's part of it. But for me, kind of starting with steps and food manipulation is kind of like the ideal place, which is another reason why kind of that coach suits me as a person. But yeah, that is like the one thing where that's just not for me.
I had a similar thing. My last prep, I didn't have cardio straight away. And then it was
Yeah.
like sort of entry level 10-15 minutes before weights. Um,
Yeah.
and it grew I guess my love of cardio came from not having to do loads.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like it was
exactly.
like, oh, it's called in 10-15 minutes to get my head in the game, think about my session, have my
Yeah.
monster,
Yeah.
get ready with my caffeine. And it
Yeah.
I now do that in off season. I actually still do a bit of cardio before, but it's all steady state. When I started,
Yeah.
I think it was probably 6 or 8 weeks out, my coach added 10 minutes at the end of a workout.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, but it was stairmaster intervals, and I was like, I'm not enjoying this now.
No,
Yeah.
that is not for me. But yeah, mine in my last prep kind of it was gradual. It was all based on like calories burned, but I would start off I think like one session every rest day, and then by the end it was kind of 4 or 5 times a week, and like it was just part of my daily routine. And like I did kind of just like I obviously got it done, but then when I got to like 3, 4, 5 weeks out, like every morning it was like a big deep breath before I did it. It was like I really don't want to get back on that bike, but like I know I have to, and it will come. That's like everyone has things in prep that they don't enjoy it, and again, it's like we said, it's part of the process. But yeah, not kind of having to start with loads of cardio has definitely been a blessing for me.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up today, is there anything other than what we've spoken about today, for first timers, because I get a lot of first timers that listen to the pod, that you would give some advice? I mean, we have covered a lot, probably most of what
Yeah.
we give.
Oh God. Put me on the spot now.
I
Uh,
always do this. It's just part of the privilege.
Yeah, I think the one thing I say is just enjoy it. I know like a lot of people will say like don't worry about placings, don't worry about this. And it's hard because I think I'm the sort of person where even in my first prep like I wanted to win. So when people were like don't worry about placings, I'm like but I want to. And like and I do think there is an element of kind of don't overly stress about it. But like kind of just enjoying it, finding your own little groove, finding your own things, and kind of not being afraid to like ask questions to people that have done it before. If you have like no questions, a stupid question, and I think like if it's your first prep and you're going through something, and chances are one of us have already been through it, so we can kind of like help that, and knowing that like I think for me, what really helped me during prep was reminding myself that the stage lean that I was getting is temporary and not thinking that you're going to stay that way. And that piece of advice for me was like, so I can't remember who told it to me, but that was the biggest thing that I reminded myself in prep. And like when external people would say like, oh, you're really lean, you're looking great, and I'm like, oh well, it's only temporary, and reminding myself that is a really good thing to kind of help you after your shows as well. But yeah, I mean, just enjoying it. And I mean, I know everyone will say like practice your posing and things like that, and they're just like the standard things that but yeah.
I
I
think that's
don't
so useful though,
know.
and a really nice way to finish today on what we've already spoken about, to take enjoyment from this choice, which is the undercurrent.
Yeah, exactly.
You've, and also, like I said earlier, I always see prep as a privilege, and that's not going to be everyone's opinion. I understand that,
Yeah.
but I always feel like it is something that's so cool that you can go down this exploration of what you can do with your physique.
Yeah, exactly. And just like enjoy that. Like
Yeah.
for me, like especially in your first prep, like you're seeing your body in places you've never seen it before. And like every week is so exciting because it's a new line that you didn't even know that existed. And even now, like I see like veins and things that I've never had before, and I get so excited, and just embracing that, and like take loads of photos, and enjoy it, and like train with people, and just kind of just yeah, like embrace like the whole process, and embrace the hard times as well, because I do think there's like when you struggle, like don't kind of think that that's an abnormal thing, because everyone goes through it, and that's what's going to make it worth it when you do kind of step on stage. Just kind of those times that were really really hard, like you can look back on. So yeah, just kind of remaining positive is a big thing.
Yeah, for sure. Mindset over everything.
Yeah, definitely.
So if anyone wanted to reach out to you, if they've resonated with anything that we've spoken about, or follow your journey, is Instagram the best place?
Yes, so Instagram under Dr.Zena, that's me.
Dr.
But
Peter.
yeah, oh God, somehow I don't really know. I still don't believe it's true. But yeah, like I'm always happy to answer questions, and if I don't reply, just double message, because I'm really kind of like dopey with stuff. I like I open things, and like it's not intentional. I open things and then I forget about them, because I start like my brain's a bit kind of dysfunctional. I think I start
Bodybuilding.
doing things like yeah, like I start doing things and then I forget, and yeah, so I'm always happy to reply. So just kind of message twice.
No, thank you for that. I always appreciate it when guests are open like that, because I feel like, very much similar to what we spoke about, no question is a silly question, and we've been there, and it's
Yeah.
probably find the same for yourself. When I get a question about something to do with like a prep or bodybuilding, I'm like, of course I can answer.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like I genuinely want people to do well. And I think
Yeah.
there is a lot of people in this sport that maybe don't, but like there are a few of us. Like I love seeing people kind of prep for their first time and look amazing. And I genuinely do want people to do well and just smash it. So like if anybody kind of does have any questions, like obviously I would be happy to kind of just try my best to help. Because I think it's amazing, and like there's so much talent, and just seeing like upcoming athletes, like I genuinely like I like get excited for that for them,
Yeah.
which is it's a nice thing, and I think there is definitely kind of still beauty in that part of the sport.
Yeah. If you find the right people around you, and people,
Yeah,
people will gravitate towards certain people that inspire
yeah,
them. it can really hold a lot of weight into your journey and your experience. So it's really nice of you to offer that. I'm sure that you will get some messages of, but if anyone has listened and you do resonate and you found today's episode useful, please share it on your stories and give us both a tag, because we would love to see it. And thank you so much for your time. I can't wait to see you on stage now.
Oh, well, thank you. So I can't wait. I'm excited. Thank you. Thanks for having me on. It means a lot. Yeah.
No problem. And I'll speak to you very soon.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Zena.